Welcome to freedomlovin.com, where we focus on building freedom in an unfree world. Through personal development, location independence, and passive income strategies. Now here's your host, Kevin Koskela.
Welcome to Freedom Lovin'. This is Kevin, and this is episode number 33. And in just a minute, I have an interview with Colin Wright of ExileLifestyle.com. And we talk about living a free life and doing what you want to do and traveling the world and all kinds of fun stuff. So stay tuned for that. Just a couple things. Happy New Year. It is now 2014, and I hope you had a great Festivus for the rest of us and everything else over the holiday season. I have a couple of actually new iTunes reviews, and the air conditioner just kicked on in my apartment. It's beginning of January, and it is like 70-something degrees outside, and so it is definitely a warm winter here in San Diego, Southern California. So I am enjoying that, although I actually, for once in my life, I actually was hoping for a little bit of cold weather because my room actually gets kind of warm. And I know nobody out there that's listening has any sympathy for me if you're living outside of a warm climate. So anyway, but it's kind of interesting. So, and sunshine all the time. So I love it. I love that. I'm always in a good mood because it's sunny every single day, pretty much. So anyway, so a couple iTunes reviews. The first one is from George Smolinski, who I just interviewed, and 5 stars. He says, great variety, awesome tips. I really appreciate how Kevin lets the interviewee talk and discuss his or her points without interrupting or sidetracking the interviewee. He has a wide variety of topics and is very professionally done podcast. Add it to your list of podcasts today. Well, thanks so much, George, and it was great having you on the show, and I'm actually just starting to implement some of the tips that you were giving on the last show. It was number 32. So, yeah, I'm going to be living the 4-hour life pretty soon here. So the second one is from, actually, it's just a bunch of characters, so there's no name, but he or she says, I like it, 5 stars. I like most episodes so far because I get to hear about ideas and viewpoints that are new to me and often useful. As in the recent episode 30 about Sex 3.0, the idea that love is, quote, the deep emotional need for the well-being of other people / another person. Well, thanks for your review. That was much appreciated. And so if you, the listener, want to help us out at the show and keep the good vibes going and keep the good guests coming and everything, just go to iTunes, type in Freedom Lovin' Podcast, and then click on the podcast, and then you can add your rating and your review. It would be much appreciated, and I will read it on the next show. So let's see. And the one more thing I wanted to mention is that I'm going to be taking a slightly different format on the podcast. I am looking at doing, instead of just interviewing people, which I like doing, and I like to get the word out there about all kinds of different lifestyles and different really exciting things that people are doing in the world. But I want to do something that ties in a benefit to the listener. So I'm going to do some more how-to podcasts. So maybe 5 ways to do X, Y, and Z. And it will still be all related to the freedom topic. So that is going to remain, but I'll just be trying to gear it towards something that you can take action on from that podcast. So, and I think there's a lot of stuff that I've already done, but I think it's just going to be a little bit more focused in the future. So stay tuned for that. Today's interview with Colin Wright is not so much a how-to, but there's definitely a lot that you can learn from it. And then just my travel schedule, I'm actually reconsidering some things. I am in San Diego now, but I'm starting to think about this, kind of what I'm doing this year, and I'm actually cutting back on what I had a lot of plans to do some big things, but now I'm thinking, kind of changing a little bit. I have a trip planned to Peru to go to do the Machu Picchu hike, and that is definitely going to stay in place. So that's going to be in March, and then actually February I'm going to be going to Mexico, and I don't have that all planned out, but I'm just going to go. I was going to do it for like a month or 2 months, but I think this one is just going to be like 2 weeks. So February, 2 weeks in Mexico. March is going to be going down to Peru, and that'll probably be another 2-week, maybe 3-week trip, and hopefully see something else in South America too. Just go maybe cruise down to Chile, check out what's going on there, and then after that, I don't have anything planned until I want to go to Europe in the summer, but that's all kind of pie in the sky at this point, and I don't have it set in stone. So otherwise, I will be in San Diego for a lot longer than I was originally thinking. So that will be a good thing. And the Passport to Freedom event is coming up in Las Vegas, January 23rd to 25th. And you can get more information on that at freedom11event.com. And I just found out that my friend Stephanie Murphy, who was on the Freedom 11 podcast, will be speaking at the show. And her talk is going to be on how to use Bitcoin to become location independent. So you don't want to miss that. It's going to be an awesome talk. And there's a whole bunch of speakers there, including Peter Schiff, who a lot of people know, and then my friend Steve Michaels, who was also on the podcast, and he is also going to be talking about Bitcoin and privacy and asset protection. So that's about it. Without further ado, here's my interview with Colin Wright. Have a great week, and go out there and build some freedom, and we'll talk to you soon. Cool. I'm really excited to have Colin Wright on the show today. Colin is an author, blogger, entrepreneur, and a full-time traveler. And he's been interviewed all over the place, and he's coming to us today from Iceland. And his website is exilelifestyle.com. Colin, welcome to Freedom Lovin'.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. So can you give us a little bit of your background, where you're from, and how your blog, Exile Lifestyle, came about?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, go back like 4 years, a little over 4 years now. I was living in Los Angeles and running a branding studio and had kind of this version of the American dream going on, which was really super cool and not something I would have predicted for myself. But was doing pretty well financially and had a great girlfriend and had that whole story. But at a certain point, she and I both realized that killing ourselves to achieve this version of the American dream, to up the numbers in our bank account, and to have a, more impressive social circle or whatever it is that you do in LA. It wasn't really worth the hours we were putting in, which was significant. We were both working probably 100 hours, 120 hours a week in some cases, just letting our heads hit the pillow at the end of the day and then waking up 4 hours later to get started again. Yeah. And it was a really miserable existence for something that was supposed to be so awesome. So we kind of decided as a pair to change things up, and that 4 months in the future we would change everything, and we would leave LA, she'd go to Seattle, and I would travel the world. And in that time, ended up getting rid of everything, started up a blog, shared a bit of knowledge about what I know, which was branding and business things that I've been doing for quite some time, and then started learning from the internet as a whole about the things that I wanted to do, which a big part of that was travel. And that's what I've been doing for the past 4 years, is traveling. And my blog readers have been great. They vote on where I move every 4 months or so. And then in between countries, I'll usually take some time to do my own self-prescribed adventure, like road tripping around the U.S. or South America, or doing something else, some other kind of random bucket list-esque goal. And then that's kind of my lifestyle these days. I do that. I don't do the branding thing so much anymore. Now I primarily write, and that's how I make my living. It's much more travel friendly. But yeah, it gives me the freedom, thankfully, to spend my winters in dark, dreary places like Iceland.
Yeah, so how did that come about? You were in Iceland before, and actually the first time I heard about you is I read your book, The Iceland to India. And
oh, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was a super cool book, like really exciting. And it was like some of the stuff that I have done, so I kind of relate, but I've never done anything like this where you just show up and you don't know anyone or anything about the place, and you're just like, okay, here I am. But yeah.
Oh, it's so much fun to do it that way. I highly recommend it. It's kind of my jam, and it's the challenge of it for somebody who's accustomed to solving problems, because that's what entrepreneurship really is solving problems. And arriving in a new place and not knowing anything. I allow myself to read the Wikipedia entry of the place I'm going to, and that's all of the research that I do. Yeah. And then I just show up, so then you have to find your way out of the airport and find a place to stay for a few days. And then in those few days, find a flat to stay at and start a network from scratch, meet a bunch of people, and then meet their friends, and then learn the customs and learn some of the language and learn which food is good and which food is poison, and all of these very important and interesting things. So the first few weeks you're in a new place is like, it's this drive, it's this excitement that I can't seem to replicate through any other means, and it just really is a blast.
Yeah, that's cool. So, but you'll go places for 4 months when your blog readers pick for you?
Yeah, usually. 2013, actually, a significant chunk of the year, I don't want to say took off, but I took off from that anyway. I didn't have people vote for most of the year because I had a bunch of stuff that I had to be in certain places in order to manage. There was a company that I started with a couple guys in Montana, and there was a bunch of interviews and speaking gigs that I had to go do and workshops and things like that. So if I would have been voted to go someplace, I would have spent most of my time away from that place, which seemed to be an injustice for that unfortunate country. So I decided to just call it off for a little while, go my own direction, and I'm actually going to start tallying the votes again this February when I leave Iceland.
Oh, okay. Yeah. How does that work then? So, because I was looking at your site, and I mean, you just have the list of every country in the world pretty much. So people can just go in there and vote. But how do things build up? How did the majority get their votes across? Or
It's really, really interesting, actually, because that form I just set up on a whim, and it's like the exact same form I've been using for the past 4 years. The idea is that people just choose whatever the hell they want, whichever country appeals to them on that list, and then if they want, they can tell me why they chose that country. And so a lot of people choose countries that they're from, or places that they live, or countries that they've been to, and some just choose the most random country they can find. There's a lot of Antarcticas, a lot of Isle of Man, a lot of North Korea, because people are jerks. Like, all these places. But the thing is, like, North Korea, if I could go there, I would. It would be insanely interesting to me. And even though right now, anytime really, it would be incredibly dangerous, if I could get there and stay there for 4 months, I think it would be one hell of an experience. And that's kind of the approach that I take, the perspective from which I approach travel, is that if any place is boring, that's my own fault. That's me being boring. That's me having a lack of imagination to see the value in the place, to see what's interesting and different. So I have to show up to every new place with the attitude of a child, really, where everything is new, because it really is. And as long as I don't go in looking for the American experience overseas, I'm going to find something interesting. And so generally, thankfully, the voting process works out. And no matter who I have voting, if I've been on TV a bunch recently or something, the demographic voting is very different from when it's just people off the internet. But regardless, I get a lot of great insight, potentially some connections, so that when I arrive in a place, I have some of these people who voted for it. So it's valuable in terms of keeping me from having to decide where to go, but also valuable potentially in terms of making these connections later on.
Yeah, that's really cool. Now, so your book, Act Accordingly, which I think is your most recent book, is that right?
It's the most recent nonfiction book.
Nonfiction, okay, yeah. So you have the philosophy of you only live once. Can you kind of elaborate on that and like how that plays into your life?
Yeah, so I ended up writing that book because I realized that the core of a lot of intertwining philosophies that I have about things kind of all come back to that idea that you have exactly one life in which to do everything you'll ever do. So act accordingly. And act accordingly is it's intentionally ambiguous, because it's not saying you have one life to live, go skydiving,
right,
or start a business, or love your family, or it can be, and it's going to be different for every single person. But the idea is that you should realize this, acknowledge the fact that your time is finite, and that everything that you do is a decision that you're making. And if you're choosing to sit and watch TV, you are choosing to watch TV instead of going skydiving, or instead of starting a business, or instead of doing whatever. And that means that if you're really truly passionate about TV, awesome, you're doing exactly the right thing, and that's totally great. You've found your purpose. But if you want something else, now is the time to do it, because you don't get a second time around. It's not a video game. You don't get extra lives, unfortunately, or at least as far as we know, you don't get extra lives. So it's best not to bet on that. It's best to act now and really brazenly move toward the things that make you happy.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned minimalism before, and I actually interviewed your business partner, one of your business partners, Ryan Nicodemus, back on the show. Yeah, so we got into, the show was all focused on minimalism, and it turned out to be I think my second most downloaded show. And I was kind of surprised at that, because I mean, it's something that I love. I love the idea of minimalism and try to do it myself. How has that made your life better in terms of your traveling, your business, and just overall?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because minimalism has become not a trend exactly, but the closest thing to it, which is good, I guess. There's positive trends, but a lot of the trending, unfortunately, moves toward the extreme versions of it, that you need to own less than nothing. I own -3 things. I've cut off 3 fingers, and now I'm the ultimate minimalist. Like, it's not all about that. And though, I participated in this like 4 years ago, too, when the blogging world of minimalism was still a wild west, and like the only person around was Leo from Zen Habits.
Yeah.
So we were all looking toward him to see what minimalism was, because the rest of us were being called minimalists, and we didn't know what that meant. Was it an insult? Was it good? So we had to kind of decide what it was for ourselves, and a lot of that was kind of like grabbing people's attention by saying, I own less than 100 things, or I own 50 things in the entire world, which is great, but not applicable for everyone. Me, I own very, very, very few things. Everything I own fits in carry-on, so I never check luggage, and that's everything that I own that fits into those bags. That makes sense for me because my priority in life is to travel and get new experiences, and I find that having too many possessions holds me back from that. It's a burden that I have to carry as opposed to being wings that help me get where I need to go, with few exceptions, obviously. The things that I do have, I try to have nice versions of them, a nice computer, a couple sets of nice clothing, those types of things. But that's the thing. That's what people should be focusing on rather than the numbers, is what is my priority? What is it that makes me the happiest in the world? And I'll beat up on people who love TV again. If you're sitting and watching TV and you're going out and spending all your money on a new big screen TV and all the little paraphers and things that go with that, that's really wonderful. If your purpose in life is TV, if TV really, really makes you happier than everything else, then spend all your money on TV, because you'll be wasting that money on anything else. Whereas if TV is not a passion, and if it's not something that really is it doesn't add net value to your life, don't spend your money on it. Just spend your money on something else. Go get a drink. Go hang out with friends. Go fly somewhere. Take a trip. Go buy a nice pair of jeans. It doesn't matter what you do as long as you're not wasting your resources, which like time, energy, money, these resources that are vital and that we all only have a certain amount of. Just don't spend it on stuff that doesn't add value to your life. And that's minimalism. That's the core essence of it, is just eliminating the extraneous. And that can mean possessions, that can mean relationships, that can mean effort, the work that you do. A truly minimalist way to approach work would be to say, is the work I'm doing really valuable to me and the people on the other end of it? Yeah. And if not, go get another job or start a business or do something that you can feel passionate about, because then it's your time and energy well spent. So that's what it comes down to for me. Is minimalism for me is just being able to completely focus on the things that are vital and really, really, truly important to me, the things that really make me happy, so that I don't have a bunch of clutter, things that don't make me happy in my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I move a lot. I don't do as much of the international stuff, but I like to live in different places, and every few months or so I'll move. And everybody around me always says, "Oh, I hate moving. It's a pain in the ass. I hate it." And I'm like, "It's not if you just rent furnished places and you get rid of all your stuff. It's pretty easy. You just pack your car and go." And it's
totally, yeah. And if that's a priority, if people are moving a lot because they enjoy the moving, then they have to decide, is it worth packing every time, or would I be better off just getting rid of some of this stuff so that then I can enjoy the moving process? I mean, it takes me all of 15 minutes to pack up everything I own and leave for the airport, which is so important to me. It is so important for happiness in my life. Whereas other people that I know, Josh and Ryan included actually over at the Minimalists, because they are definitely minimalists in that they focused and honed in on the stuff that they love. But they own more stuff. They own furniture. They own cooking supplies and things, because that's what's important to them. It's not as important that they be able to hop on a plane in 15 minutes. It's more important that they have a nice home, a place that they like going home to, that they like working at, things like that.
Yeah. So how do you do it? Like, I was in Thailand recently, and that's pretty easy to pack for because it's hot there. So you don't need to pack much in terms of clothes. How do you do it with Iceland? Do you just show up and buy your clothes when you get there? Or?
Usually not. Sometimes. But usually I find it's best to just layer and to bring a lot of layers and then sort it out when you arrive. In this case, in this trip, I've done it different times, different ways, different times I've gone to cold places. But this time around, I have some long sleeve shirts. I have kind of an under puffer jacket that I can wear under any type of jacket. I have a real thick hoodie. and then I have a kind of an overlayer jacket as well. And if I use it correctly, I can get insanely warm because I put on like 3 different jackets. If it's not so cold outside, then I can just wear 1 jacket or 2 jackets. That way everything is very versatile and malleable, and I don't have one enormous jacket that I'm hauling around trying to fit into my luggage or carrying outside my luggage, which becomes a pain in the ass too.
Yeah.
This is what tends to work best for me, partially because, one, I try not to look like a tourist when I go to a place, and almost invariably if you show up and buy something, the things that will stand out the most are the ones that are geared toward tourists, and then that kind of marks you for anybody who wants to scam you or sell you on the wrong tourist route. So I just kind of dress very unnoticeably, lots of grays, but also plenty of layers. That way, one, it kind of looks like I have more clothes than I do because I can wear different jackets in different combinations or something, which is important when you're essentially a homeless person and trying not to look homeless. But 2, it really does give you, I could take what I have now, my Icelandic gear, and go to a very hot place. Like I did just recently. I just took a trip to Morocco, and it was quite a bit warmer. But the things that I have here work there too, because I have shirts that are nice and cool by themselves, or a light jacket that I can wear that here I wear as part of a layering system, but there I wear by itself.
Yeah, cool. Good tips. So as far as the traveling goes, what's the most bizarre thing that's ever happened to you when you're traveling?
God, these types of questions are tough because it's hard to pick just one. I could do an Icelandic themed one. When I was here originally, the first time I came here, I come here from time to time to visit friends and just to hang out because the climate is perfect for my creative process. I love winter. I love wintry places and snow and wind and such. But the first time I came here, I was hanging out with a slightly different crowd, and we were going out to kind of these really weird old people bars and stuff for some reason. Because one of my friends, actually, this was the reason, a girl that he really liked was living there, or was working there. So we had to go to this just horrible bar all the time. And one time I was standing there talking to her because he had gone to use the bathroom or something, my friend. And this older gentleman, a really ambiguous European accent, comes up to me and says, with your face, you should aim your cock higher. And I just stared at him for probably a full minute as he looked at me and nodded and holding like a cocktail or something, old Spanish, and nodded at me sagely, and then stumbled back to his table. And it's just, what do you say to that? And that was one of the more intelligible things I've had said to me by strangers while traveling. Yeah. Because most people who are on the road, if they're not locals, if they're locals, then they're just comfortable. So they're totally cool with weirding out the strangers coming to visit. Yeah. But if they're other travelers, in a lot of cases they're on vacation, or they're crazy old people who are just traveling all the time. So there's so many characters that you meet, and just bizarre little interactions like that where there's nothing you can do but like kind of smile and nod and say, yep, that's going to make a story later. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that's a pretty good one. So I wanted to go back to your book and Act Accordingly. You said, this is a quote, you said, to me, the best rules increase my levels of freedom, not fence me in. They guide rather than conceal. They add value rather than take it away. Can you talk a little bit more about this, and how can you or somebody increase their levels of freedom in their life?
Yeah, well, a big part of it is just focusing on freedom. It's considered to be one of these things, especially in the Western world, that we hold so dear, yet most of us, a lot of our actions belie that fact. A lot of our actions seem to imply that we would rather give up freedom for short-term benefit in terms of the jobs that we take or the relationships we get into, the work that we do, the things we spend our money on. Whereas if you make sure that you are financially independent, if you're able to make a living, if you're able to pay your bills, if you're able to keep a roof over your head and keep yourself fed with money that you make by doing something that you choose to do, doing the type of work that you choose to do, working for the people or with the people that you choose to work with. I mean, that to me is freedom. And there's still constrictions there. There's still rules and regulations that you can put in place. Most relationships, even the most open relationships in the world, usually have some constraints just for the safety of everyone involved, or to make sure that everybody's getting what they need out of the situation, that type of thing. But that doesn't mean that all constraints will limit your freedoms. In some cases, you can give up a little tiny bit or give up something that isn't really giving up something because it's what you want anyway to get a whole lot in return. And so that's what I'm talking about, is that it's making decisions in the way you spend your money, the way you spend your time, the way you spend your effort and energy, the people you surround yourself with, the type of work that you do, the type of goals that you have, every little thing. If you move consistently towards freedom, you'll find yourself with a lot more of all those things in the future and a lot more options in the future. And as much as anything, that's vital to me, is leaving myself open to opportunities and ensuring that I'm in the position to take advantage of them when they arise.
Yeah, absolutely. So it comes down to like each decision that we make, kind of weighing it against how much freedom is that going to give me, and where is that going to bring me,
or how much do I give up? And we consider this too. A lot of times we'll look at these types of trade-offs and not consider freedom as an element that's being traded, even though latently it's there. Anytime you sign a contract or commit yourself to a certain type of work or commit some of your time or your name, if you're not able to say certain things or whatever it happens to be, that's giving up some degree of freedom, and that's something that you need to work into the formula. I'm not saying that it's always going to be wrong, because it's very hard to do anything without risking at least giving up some of that freedom, but it's definitely something you need to work into the calculus when deciding, is the money I'm getting traded for my freedom worth it? Is the relationship that I'm getting for my freedom worth it? Those types of considerations.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, so your current business, you're running Asymmetrical with the guys we mentioned, with the minimalists. How do you run that from the road?
Thankfully, those guys are great business partners, because they're not as big on traveling, so they prefer to kind of put down some roots and become part of a community and stick around. So the balance is definitely there. They kind of come from the corporate world, and so they are immensely talented at maintaining things, making sure the trains run on time, working with people. A lot of these things that are not my dominant strengths, whereas for me it's more about starting things and like kind of starting fires and seeing what happens and trying out new things quickly. So between us, we all have a little bit of all of those skills, but our strengths definitely balance each other out. So my being on the road is not such a big deal, because that's kind of the way I operate with every business I work with or run. Whereas anything that needs to be done within the certain time zone, or that needs to be mailed within the US, or anything that they need to do to actually go see someone in person, those guys have got that covered. And so it's been actually remarkably easy working with them, because the things that count, the way that we view the publishing industry and the way that we like to do business, which is just a very honest way and focused on many things beyond just money, those are things we hold the same values on. All the other stuff is very, very different, the way that we operate. So we've got a nice round effort between the three of us.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, and then you had said we should respect the value added, not the effort exerted. Does that mean that you're pretty much just a 4-hour-a-week guy?
No. Yeah, the whole 4-hour thing is something that's going to be an issue for this side of things for a long while, because it really does give the wrong idea. I have no idea how many hours I work a week, and probably way more than most people. It's just that the work that I do, I love. So if I were to say, I'm going to take a vacation, I'm going to stop writing today, that would be the most miserable, stupid vacation ever. And I even try to do this every once in a while. I convince myself I can take a normal vacation. But the only thing I want to do when I have time is write and involve myself in the other business things that I've got going. And that's what I do all day, every day, because I've got the time. I've got as much time as I want to put in whatever projects I want. And therefore, the things that I'm doing kind of is me playing. It's me enjoying myself. So the work-life thing kind of ceases to be an issue if you're able to achieve a certain level of freedom with the work that you do and all these things. Once you have that scaffolding put up, then you don't find yourself thinking, man, I really need better work-life balance, because they're one and the same, really.
Yeah, exactly. So what motivates you to keep writing?
Oh, I love telling stories. I like the craft of it. I'm a designer by education, and I was a painter before that. So just expressing myself creatively and communicating things is something that I kind of need to do. And building things too is something that I kind of have this drive to do. It really makes me happy and makes me feel fulfilled. So being able to explore other things, other topics and philosophies and possibilities and such characters through these books. Really just, it's so much fun. I can't not do it. That's the point that it's at.
Yeah.
This last year alone, I just sent out a newsletter actually right before we hopped on, and I was counting, and I published 10 books this year. And just Act Accordingly was one of them. But then I've published a bunch of fiction and some short story collections, and started a few series and wrote a couple books in other series I have going. It's just so much fun. And it's amazing how much you can get done, how much real solid work you can put in when none of it seems like work. That's what writing is to me.
Yeah, and so your books, is that like a good chunk of your income, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's it. The vast majority of it, probably 85, 90%. The other parts come from, I teach workshops, or I've got some classes that I teach online every once in a while. Little things like that are kind of, honestly, the money is a little ineffectual. It's more, I'll travel for the workshops, or I'll do the classes because people have asked, how can I learn design as it's applied to publishing? How can I design book covers and blog stuff? And so then I'll put together a class that then makes me a little bit of money, but is cheap enough that people who are students or who don't have a lot of money to throw around can still afford. That's the way that I like to do things. It's more about keeping the audience, making sure that they're getting what they need from the relationship, because I get so much in return. I want to make sure it's a very balanced relationship that keeps going.
Yeah, that's really awesome. So dating, one of my favorite topics. So I like to talk about this concept of dating on the road, because there are so many people that are thinking about doing this kind of location-independent lifestyle, and that's always a thing that comes up, is like, how do you date? So how do you do that? And I heard you talk about, in one of your interviews, I heard you say something about how time limits can actually be like a good thing when it comes to dating on the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It kind of going back to something you had asked before about how limitations can free you. Sometimes having a time constraint can free you from overthinking, or can free you from expectations. So in terms of relationships, since I've started traveling, I've just approached them in a different way. And because I haven't been able to look at them and say, this is something that I'm thinking of potentially lasting forever and ever and ever, instead I'm saying, is this something that will be awesome right now? Is this something that I want to spend some time with, something that I want to explore further? Those in the moment concerns become more important when you have that type of time limit, because the expectation is that you can always come back to it if you want to, and it's something that you can continue. And ideally, I mean, if you really like the other person, which it tends to be the case, or has always been the case for me, you stay in touch. We live in the future, so there's never goodbye. There's just see you later. So, we're Facebook friends, and we'll email, or we'll keep in touch, even if just in little ways, but sometimes in much bigger ways. Sometimes it's more frequent, and that's amazing. It's amazing that we have the ability to do that, but definitely impacts the way you look at relationships too. People who are looking for something very traditional might have trouble when they're traveling, because then you will go into it perhaps with the expectation that this person I've just met, maybe this will be marriage. Like, if you're going into it with that, then you're not getting the full benefit of that dropping expectations at the door type of mentality. Whereas if you're a little bit more fluid with it, I do open relationships these days and date other people who do the same. So that way, we can be together when we're together, and then when not, we can just, be very good friends that stay in touch. And that type of thing tends to work very, very well on the road, because then you're open to form relationships, whatever type of relationship. It could be romantic, it could be just a great friendship, it could be a business relationship. But leaving yourself open to the possibilities is important, because otherwise, with all things in travel, really, because otherwise you're kind of just trying to bring your home with you. And then what's the point of traveling if you're just going overseas and saying, I want everything to be like it is in America, and I want all the relationships to be the same, and I want the food to be the same? You might as well just stay home and spend your money on a bigger TV instead at the end of the day. And so the same applies with relationships. I think the people who have the most success with it are the ones who go out and adhere to a few guidelines, just make sure nobody gets hurt, leave people better than you found them if you possibly can in some way, make sure that the relationships are balanced, that everybody's getting what they need out of it, and make sure that the expectations are set and are very, very clear. It's just clear communication. Don't try to trick people. Don't try to make them think that there's going to be something there if there isn't. Or the flip side, don't try to make them think there won't be something there if that's what you're intending. As long as you communicate clearly and treat people well, then generally there's no issues if you're trying to date or have any other type of relationship on the road.
Yeah, I totally agree. Now, so for you personally, how does it work? Like, you're meeting people, and is it like you're right away saying, look, I'm only going to be here for a few months? Is that something you start out with, and then how does that go over typically?
Kind of. I mean, I kind of have a personal policy that I don't do typical first dates. I do coffee dates, and that way there's not really an expectation of there being anything beyond just sitting and making a new friend.
Yeah.
So that tends to work really well for everybody, because that way nobody feels too disappointed if it's something that our ideas about relationships or expectations don't match. But then it's also a great point where you can very conversationally, easily, no pressure, bring up the fact that, hey, listen, I'm only in town for X number of days or X number of weeks or X number of months. Then I'm going, and that's the way things are. That way nobody's thinking that they're going to change you, and if you leave anyway, it's not because of them, and then they know exactly what they're getting into. And then you can find out the same from them, what their expectations are, what their deal breakers are, what type of attitude they want to go into things with, if they do in fact want to go into anything.
Yeah, totally. So, okay, so you're in Iceland in the winter, and is your second time there now? Is that your favorite place to be?
Oh, different places are my favorite for different things. This time around, this year, because I had this extra time at the end of the year, I came back here to, one, meet up with an old friend, somebody that I see when I'm in town. So we get to play house for a bit and enjoy each other's company for a while, which is not always possible. And then also I wanted to experience the weather and the winter and everything here in Iceland, because when I first arrived, I arrived in February, I believe, and I've been there through the summer, and then I've been in and out a few times during different times of the year, but I've never done an Icelandic winter. So this has been very interesting for me, for the 24 hours of darkness and all the cold and the rain and the sleet and everything. It's been fabulous. But there's a lot of other countries that I love as well. This one's just very conveniently located. It has some people that I really enjoy seeing, and was a great place to camp out and sit around and write for a few months.
So you haven't hit any walls of depression with the 24 hours of darkness?
Thankfully, no. I wrote about this actually I have this newsletter type thing that I put out called Exiles. I wrote about this the other day, that it does hit you sometimes, the vitamin D deficiency, and even knowing full well what it is, you still immediately think, oh God, I'm getting sick, or man, what a bad day this has been. Like, you don't attribute it to the vitamin D deficiency, but then once you start thinking about it, and you can kind of learn to time your exercise and your food intake and your coffee and stuff for different times during the day, you can regulate it. But it does kind of hit you, and people do get a little bit more mopey and don't spend so much time outside, partially because of the weather, I'm sure, but partially, I think, because of the seasonal thing.
Yeah, and so is it like everyone's addicted to coffee and hanging out in coffee shops, or?
Coffee shop culture hasn't been a huge thing here, and it's just now starting up. They've got a few places that now have little franchises within the country, but it's not a Starbucks culture or anything. So mostly people make their own coffee and drink some tea, and it's more a beer drinking country, honestly. Okay. So that tends to be the way people soak their sorrows.
Yeah, interesting. So what's it like there after I know in like 2008, I guess it was, or 2009, there was a big banking collapse, and they kind of like kicked the bankers out of the country.
Yeah, they sent some bounty hunters after some of them, actually. They approached it right, man. They kicked them out. They let the banks collapse, and then they sent bounty hunters after the jerks who did it. But it's good. I mean, honestly, the first time I came was after that as well, so I never got to see it beforehand. But from what I understand, it was this big bubble, and just everybody was spending, and the banks and everybody was encouraging them to spend more, take out more loans, and everybody just had a bunch of loans, and they were just hanging themselves with these strings of debt. It was probably a good thing that it collapsed when it did, so that they could get started, and that they allowed it to collapse so that they could start fresh. We'll see how things go this time around, because I believe the government that caused all that is the government that's coming back into power. So we'll see if they screw them over again after they've had this very interesting several years of getting back on their feet. But I'm thankful for it in a way, because frankly, I don't think I could have afforded to stay here very long if I would have come back before the crash. Their currency devalued drastically, and way back then it was cheaper for them in some cases to fly to New York and shop there than to shop in Reykjavik.
Oh yeah, for sure. for sure. Cool. Well, do you know where you're headed next?
Not yet, no. I'm going to tally the votes in February, and then shortly thereafter head out. So it'll be a surprise, a nice New Year's surprise for myself.
Nice. So, and you're going to keep doing the same business and plugging along there and keep doing your writing, and any other plans for the new year?
There's some that I can't talk about just yet. They're not fully fleshed out, but hopefully sometime in February or March, I'll have some announcements to make on a multimedia front, which could be cool. But other than that, yeah, I'm enjoying the hell out of what I'm doing. We're looking into a bunch of opportunities through Asymmetrical Press, just in terms of expanding our reach to get our own shelves and relationships with indie bookstores and stuff all over North America, actually. And then just we're publishing the works of a lot of great authors. So that's been very exciting. Yeah, between that and my own writing stuff and getting to travel, I have zero complaints. So even if all of the new possibilities somehow don't work out, I'm still going to continue having a blast in 2014.
Nice. So one more thing before we sign off here. What would you say to somebody that's kind of looking to have more freedom in their life and kind of do something similar to what you're doing in terms of like permanent travel? What kind of advice would you give them?
The best piece of advice I could give is to, before you jump and before you just decide I need to go travel and I need to do this and I need to do that, a lot of people make decisions based on other people's ideals. So the way that I'm doing things works really well for me, and the way that Kevin's doing things works really well for him. That doesn't mean it's going to be the right way for you. So take the time to really take stock and figure out why you want to travel, why you want to go minimal, or why you want to be location independent, why you want to do a certain type of work. Before taking any of these jumps, really figure out something about yourself, because most of us don't. Most of us do not take the time, and we only find out through trial and error. So then we've gotten rid of our job and our home and our family, and we're on the road and we're doing all these things, and then we realize, this is not really that appealing to me. This is not as sexy as I'd been led to believe. Maybe I want to do this other thing instead. As best you can, without actually doing it, figure out which is the best path, and then start down that path, but allow yourself to adjust it over time. Because just because something seems great when you read about it or on TV or whatever, doesn't mean that you're seeing the entire picture. It doesn't mean that the trade-offs will be worth it for you. It doesn't mean that it will give you what you want and what you need. So ensure that the decisions that you make, especially the drastic decisions, are going to take you on a path toward goals that are actually your goals.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great advice. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Colin. I really feel inspired now, and I'm ready to go take some action on my goals, and I think everyone else listening to this will as well.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, Colin's website is exilelifestyle.com. And was there another website that you have, or?
Oh, you could do asymmetrical.co. That's the website of Asymmetrical Press, which is my and Josh Milburn and Ryan Nicodemus's company, through which we're publishing our work and a bunch of other talented writers' work. And then if you search for my name on Amazon, just Colin Wright, then you can find all the books I've written. There's way too many of them to list right now, so there's a little something for everybody out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, good luck with everything, and thanks again, and hopefully keep in touch, and I'll be following you, and I'm anxious to hear where you're headed next.
Yeah, hey, me too.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Freedom Lovin' Podcast. To break free today, head on over to freedomlovin.com and download our free guide. 7 practical tips to living free in an unfree world.